Hi everyone, and welcome to As I Am webinar, which is part of our Autism Friendly University webinars. And in response to our students and colleges reaching out to us for guidance and information about managing stress and the university environment, we are delighted today to have Dr. Amy Laurent and Dr. JÄcqûelyn Fede from Autism Level Up. Their philosophy is that through education, accessible resources, and practical strategies, and a commitment to consistently incorporating the experiences and perspectives of autistic people, they can support the levelling up of society when it comes to autism and neurodiversity. So now I'm going to hand over to both of you, and I'm dying to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much for having us. We're thrilled to be here and to be asked to talk about this topic, because this is a special interest of ours, regulation in general. So we have a couple slides that we prepared, so we'll start there and we'll see where we wind up. So let me just pull up my screen and we'll get going. I know I should always let you do that. She's faster at that than I am. Okay, so when you approached us, you asked us specifically to talk about how do we support energy regulation and kind of self-advocacy for third level students who are making this transition during such uncertain times, because this is really kind of unprecedented area that we find ourselves in. And we have a couple thoughts just to kind of frame our conversation to help us move forward so that we're all kind of on that same playing field. And one is that there was no way to predict that this was going to happen. So there was really no way to prepare for it. It's still new, even though it truly started in March, and it's really not normal, even though people are talking about it being a new normal. You know, day to day, things fluctuate wildly, especially here in the States. Just everything is so uncertain around the current situation. And that uncertainty really upends predictability and routine. And we know that predictability and routine serve as a foundation for comfort and regulation for everybody.
It really is everyone too. I mean, in some ways, your first year going on to college can be the most unpredictable and most challenging. But in a sense, in this case, if you've been going to university and you've figured everything out and you had a flow, and now you really don't know what that's going to look like, and you had that framework set in your mind, it can be just as or more than dysregulating.
Yeah.
Because you had that blueprint and now you have to get rid of all of that and kind of rebuild. So it is a challenge, and we're all going to make mistakes and get things wrong. But we're trying to provide a framework that at least gives you a way to think and about this. And when you have to make shifts or zigzags, as we sometimes call them, you have
tools to help navigate that. So again, we're in a super challenging situation, and really we are at a place where everything is unknown. So a lot of times when we start to think about our days and how they break down and how we spend our time and what activities are regulating for us versus what is more challenging and stressful and might need some coping strategies, we kind of think about them in percentages. And that's why these pie charts are flying across your screen right now, because nobody quite knows how their pie chart is going to break down, what it's going to look like. And so you could say, well, what does a typical third level day look like? But now it's what should it look like versus what is it going to look like in the context that you're in. One of the things that we're going to emphasize, whether not so much through the slides, but we'll talk a lot about, is you need to make sure that you keep those activities in your life that you know are truly regulating for you to be a big chunk of your pie. So I know the font is really small on your screens, but that yellow chunk, that play and leisure chunk, those are the things that fuel you. You need to make sure that you schedule those in your day in any way that you can, because that's going to give you the energy to need to cope or in a more challenging situation. Good?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So all of this to say, this disruption and this unpredictability is going to create dysregulation. We know it. So what's going to counter that as self-knowledge and self-advocacy? And as JÄcqûelyn said, we want to make sure that you've got some tools that we're talking about that you feel like you're armed with, so to speak, so that you can like kind of charge in and counter that. So that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I think so much of this is so unpredictable. So the more you can know the core of yourself, and understand that, the more you'll be able to apply it every time that situation does change. Like if we have that foundation of, I know my own needs,
Right.
and then you can also transfer them onto different situations. That in itself is empowering. So that's kind of where we have our focus today, is kind of how do you build your own profile and have it available to you, so that as this situation, like kind of the one predictable thing is that things are going to change all the time. I know how to do this process again.
Exactly. So what we really want to start with is making sure that people understand that we have a whole suite of tools on our website and our Facebook page, which are both Autism Level Up, that you can download for free and use. So any of the things that you're seeing here today, you can quickly get to through our Facebook page or our website, and you can download them and fill them out for yourself. Because for some of you, this might be a really familiar way to think about your needs in terms of regulation and energy and just being able to feel comfortable in navigating your environment. And for some of you, it might be newer. So what we want to do is try to give you a framework to maybe focus and organize some of what you know about yourself. And so the first place that we start in our work is using this concept of energy. So instead of talking about emotion, because how do you feel about emotion, Jãcqûelyn?
How do I feel about emotion? That is not a nice question. I'm now amped up and fidgety. No, emotion and labeling emotion is something that never resonated with me throughout my life. To me, it's like an added layer of complexity and like abstract thing that we're adding on to just things that feel different in my body. Like I have a really hard time, or I have no time at all, putting a word like happy or angry or sad on top of I feel energy surging and rising within me. So this, we think, breaks it down, and it takes away that layer of abstract, of abstract layering of emotion. So we find that this is more of a common ground for. There are autistic people who relate to emotion labels
Absolutely.
and use them, and that's fine.
And they can if they should,
Yep.
if they want to, yeah.
But stripping this down, we don't feel takes away from like a neurotypical person's ability to understand what's going on. And it even for some of us who understand emotion, when you get to these higher levels of amped up and maxed out, you might not have access to the words. So having a visual like this is a lot better for me.
So this framework will kind of serve as the foundation for the other tools that we're going to show you. And this is actually a language that we've adopted and we use between the two of us now. Even though I asked her how she felt about something, I don't, and happy slips out of my mouth on occasion. This is truly the language that we use to communicate with state what we need to do to support each other. But you'll see that on one side of this, it says the energy needed for the activity. And that's going to be a critical piece for all of your third level students to identify is in this activity, what kind of energy is going to be the most productive and the most supportive of active engagement, right? So Jãcqûelyn, you played soccer or football throughout college. You needed to be in that amped up and fidgety place. You needed energy to be able to do that.
All the time, which was a great fit for me because I kind of idle somewhere around that amped up and fidgety.
Close to the maxed out and frenzied line, honestly. Yeah. And versus in a classroom setting, oftentimes people will anticipate that we should be in a focused and purposeful state or maybe settled and calm. And when you're going to bed at night, we need to get too sleepy and still so we can stay there. So, so the left side is really what energy do you need for the activity. It's an interesting exercise to go across your day. Once you have identified what activities you're doing, go across your day and figure out which energy fits with which activity.
Yeah.
And then the green side here is actually my energy. So if I get into one of your soccer practices but you were into a soccer practice, you know, there's a mismatch between that amped up and fidgety need and where your energy is. How do you rev yourself up? How do you power up to get to that place? Right. So this is a tool that we kind of conceptualize when we know there's a need to shift it's important for us to identify how big of a need there is to shift it.
Right. And I think it's so important that it is visual, because you can, have your arrow on my energy side and have your arrow on your energy needed side and see visually how big of a gap is there between where I am right now and where I need to be able to engage in this activity that I want to do or need to do.
All right. So one of the other things that's really important, and this is kind of moving us towards our real conceptual understanding of this energy, is that a lot of times people assume when we're well regulated, we're calm. And we kind of just covered that we're not. Well regulated is the right that we're engaging in. So again, if it's a soccer or football practice, we're going to be in that amped up and fidgety. If it's before bedtime, we want to be in sleeping and still, and hopefully if it is, we should hit asleep and stay there as well. So energy is going to shift across our day. And I think that's a really important takeaway for the students listening to think about, because so many times I think we're just drilled to think that calm is the right state to be in. And it's not. That's not going to be functional at all if you're in goal and you're trying to block.
No, actually, I am probably the most settled and calm in goal.
Well, true, and yes, you are, but it's like laser focus. Yeah, focus. So I think that idea of moving away from this goal, no pun intended because there's no pun, but of being calm and helping your students recognize that calm isn't the right place to be all the time, and having the permission to have, not permission, but just having the knowledge that you need this flow of energy across your day, and understanding which types of activities match which types of energy levels is critical. And especially looking at those things that you say are regulating the play and leisure, like what energy levels are those? Are those on the lower side, or are those on the higher side of the energy level that you seek out?
Activities help you move in each direction. Yes. That's a critical piece as well that we'll talk about how to think through.
Okay, so the next piece of this is really, once you get to this idea that calm is not our goal is to make sure our energy matches the activities that we're engaged in. And that can be honoring the fact that we're going into a new classroom with a new teacher, with new students, and that is an ampy kind of experience. The next part is to say, my energy, what it looks like for me, is not maybe what you might expect or think. Because a lot of times we think about things like maxed out and frenzied, and we have this neurotypical impression of what the physical presentation of that is, or even what it feels like to the person. And that's not necessarily true. So being able to not just develop an awareness of that, but really accept that you're not trying to fit in a mold. Right. Your expression doesn't have to be what somebody else thinks it's going to be, is right.
And letting people in when you have your own self-knowledge of what that really looks like and feels like to you, letting your partners who you are in contact with most often know what that looks like, so that they are able to provide better support, is also really helpful. And just as an example, like no matter what state I'm in, I'm pretty much extremely smiley for everything. So
it's true.
People will often not recognize when I'm really dysregulated,
right?
Unless you know me.
She has different smiles for different things.
Yeah.
So as part of this kind of conceptualization of energy and thinking about matches and mismatches in the environment, that next step of that awareness and acceptance of not thinking you need to fit into a mold, but identifying what the energy looks like for you and being able to convey that to other people. Again, that's the start of that advocacy. We have a tool on our website and the Facebook page called My Energy, where you can actually go through these 6 different states and identify what it looks like for you to other people. So what other people might observe, hear, or I can't think. Whatever. And then the other side is what it feels like. So, if you've got these 3rd level students who are able to express themselves and put it in writing and to be able to convey what that feels like, it's really powerful information to provide to partners. Because I know when you did this.
Yeah, it's extremely empowering because it was really the first time in my life where I was telling other people what it looks like and feels like for me, rather than them trying to teach me what some energy state should look like, what's the indication I should give when I am happy or sad or excited. So this was really empowering, because it's like, it's just flipping that script and asking someone, what's it like for you? What's your experience? So I know, rather than what this should look like, you need to change. So it's a great exercise to work through if you are autistic, or if you are close to someone who is autistic and you support them. This is a great
And I think one of the things for me, when you worked through it and you shared it with me, was I was pretty familiar with what it looked like for you, but for you to tell me what it felt like in your body just gave me a whole new appreciation of what your experience was. And like, I knew you needed support, but it took those needs to a higher level. Or prioritization. So I think, again, these tools where we start to carve out this concept of energy, you'll see how they apply when we start thinking about context. But if you can give people this background knowledge, so that when you get into a situation where there is an energy mismatch, somebody is at the ready with tools to support you, or to give you the space you need to support yourself, which is critical too. Good? Okay. All right. So this does take us to this person in context tool, which is the one that Katie originally asked us to talk about, but we wanted to frame it with some of those other pieces. One of the things that's so important for us to understand is regulation is a super complex process, right? So when we're talking about being able to be well-regulated or actively engaged or feel comfortable and confident in our environment, regardless of where our energy level is, but just have a good match, we have to be honest about all of the things that are impacting it. And if we're honest about all the things that impact our energy, suddenly when someone asks us if we've tried yoga or taken a few deep breaths, you might want to check them. How do you feel about deep breaths?
Useless. Or annoying.
The sound.
Yeah.
We start to understand why those simple strategies don't often work for individuals. It's not that they don't ever work for somebody, but they don't often work more times than not. And it's because of this complexity. So there are many, many factors that are going to impact where your energy is at any given moment. And that's what this tool really highlights, is your person. This is you. This is who you are and how you experience the world. So this tool is really meant to be, as Jãcqûelyn said, kind of the foundation and the constant that you take and apply to other situations. So there's going to be a range of experiences. Like you'll see one of the boxes we have here is communication. Obviously, there are times that Jãcqûelyn is very verbal, like today. But in times of extreme stress, she's also very situationally mute, or can be.
And when you combine that with my social box, I can talk forever about topics about which I'm passionate and love, and there's meaning and it's information that I'm relaying onto an audience. But if I am in an unstructured social situation, one, I have zero desire for that, and two, it amps me up to no end.
So the goal of this sheet, and again, totally downloadable for free from our website and Facebook page, is to sit either yourself and work through it, or sit with somebody who supports you and really think about who you are as a person from a physiological standpoint. And you want to think about it from both risk and protective factors. So where do you see kind of the chinks in your armor, so to speak, but where's your strength as well? You want to be able to carve both that out. So physiological, anything from sleep to nourishment, health, interoception. Jãcqûelyn will talk about her own experience here in just a minute. Sensory, where do you have those heightened senses? Or maybe you hyposensitive. Where do you have fluctuations in that? That's going to be really informative when we start thinking about context, right? Because we need to put your sensory profile in the context that you're expected to exist within. And is there a match? So if you're sensitive to sound, but you're going into a library, that's a good match. But if you're sensitive to sound and you're going into a parade downtown, that's maybe a really bad match. And then the motor pieces, so muscle tone, coordination, endurance, preferences. Cognitive, we get into things like executive functioning, around decision making, processing. Social understanding is a huge one here for people.
Reliance on routine and predictability, very important for this specific time period.
Right.
And always.
Right. But also to be able to identify that in your whole context, like where of your whole person, where does that fall? Like, is that a huge protective factor when you have that? And it's a huge risk factor when you don't. I mean, one of the things we often talk about for you, if we look at all of these and all of your risk and protective factors, sleep is one of your biggest ones, right?
And I just also want to say, when we say risk and protective factors, on this part, you're really not thinking like that. You're just thinking of what it is. Like, I am super sensitive to smells. And then it's the environment or the activity that either will make that a risk factor or a protective factor for me, because there are times I can use that as a regulating thing, and where scent will soothe me and bring on really visual and very pleasant memories. And there's times when I'm in an environment where that will amp up my energy. I often say, if I go into like a cafeteria or a restaurant, I always have changes of clothes with me in sealed
bags,
because once it is in my clothing, there's nothing else I can do for the day. And like bacon or fried food,
French fries,
will just like
cafeteria pizza.
So just all that to say, this is just who you are. Who you are is not inherently a risk or protective factor.
Good point.
It's when you apply it to the
you are correct
situation. I know. I am. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. But just what we want to do to be able to really form this advocacy around your regulation needs is to identify this profile. And again, there's going to be a range, because for JÄcqûelyn, she can talk about being verbal in the communication, but she can also talk about being situationally mute at times. So people don't expect her ability to be the same all the time. So this is a constant, but it's a constant that can fluctuate.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then, do you want to talk about, you introduced this a little bit already.
Yeah, I love this support, because yes, we are going to focus on the person, and we want to know the person as well as possible. And we want that person to have as much self-understanding as possible, because that knowledge is so powerful and so empowering. And it's the foundation for advocacy. But we also want it very explicit that at the most, we're putting 1/3 of the onus on the autistic person. We also need to look at the environments in which they exist and the activities in which they have to, need to, and want to partake. And so I think so often the burden falls on autistic people to make changes or use strategies and use tools. And that's great. We want them to have strategies and tools to use.
Absolutely.
But I also will always emphasize, I am really self-aware through my journey and working with Amy. I am very aware of my needs, my profile, all of this. But there are times where I'm like, I can't use another strategy. Yeah. I can't always be the one to bust out my tools and my strategies. Sometimes things have got to give. So even if you're someone who's very aware and you have a lot of tools and strategies, but you find yourself absolutely drained or exhausted at the end of the day, you might take a look at the balance. Where are the accommodations for you happening? Because it shouldn't be all on you. So as the autistic person.
Right.
And, if you see that as a staff or a partner too, where this person is a rock star and it's really easy, you think it's very easy to be with them, really evaluate what are the activities, what are the environments, and how often, how much of the time am I asking them to use some kind of strategy, rather than maybe making a simple change in the environment that could take a lot of burden off of them. So this is like an explicit reminder that we need to look at how that profile lines up with the environment and the activity across these same domains. And if we find a huge mismatch, we need to target our strategies and our accommodations in that domain.
Right.
Sensory is a great example, and I am like a super seeker. Sensory is my, no, not yet. Okay. Sensory is my thing. But there are points where if you just keep throwing on sensory, and the mismatch is executive functioning and decision-making, you could have a buffer for a little bit, but it's never going to solve the underlying issue. So this really, it takes time up front. It's an investment, but once you have it, and once you have this way of thinking, your strategies and accommodations get so much more targeted and can have such a greater effect, because you're helping in areas where support is actually needed.
We can target.
I have a story about myself.
before we flip to the story, I just want to emphasize a point that you made and just make it very clear, is for these students who are going into their third level, whether this is their first year or they're going in as, a subsequent year, if they can now at this time really sit and think about that person profile and get that nailed down, that will give them the foundation that when they get to university, when they get to their new housing accommodation, when they get to their class, then you pull out these 2 sheets and quickly write in what you know about the new housing accommodation or the new class or whatever. And that's where you start looking for the matches and the mismatches. And that's where you start to be able to advocate for, I need the sensory thing, or I need this study assistance, or I need someone to understand my communication style.
Or sharing it with, if it's shared accommodations and you're living with other humans, autistic or not, I'm not sure how they set it up at their universities, but this is a great thing that you can hand to a roommate or compare with roommates, because autistic stims as triggers for other autistic people are such a real thing. And we heard from so many families throughout this lockdown where there's autistic mom, 2 autistic children, neurotypical father, and we're all trying to be in the same small space together, and it's just hard. So similar if you're in a shared living situation at a university.
But if they can spend time in that identifying that person piece now, then when they get into a situation, they only have to go through the activity in the environment. Okay, you want to do a little bit about your story?
Yeah, I'm not going to read. This is actually online.
It is.
So if you wanted to read my full profile and how I've applied it to one of my environments and activities, which was a poor fit for me, you can definitely do that. But I really like to tell the overall story of what happened when I did this, because it was so helpful for me. Like I said before, I went into this and I was like, I am so self-aware. I've got this.
I wrote the tool.
I know exactly what it's going to look like. Okay, let me just start filling it in.
Amy just said we need to put an example online.
So I'll do it. And I decided to do it and we always suggest when you first do this, do it for an activity or environment that you're really comfortable in, and then also do it for one that you have a really hard time and really extreme, because that's the easiest way to see the mismatches first.
So it would be a useful exercise for people to do at home now while they're waiting to go to university, just to get in the flow of it.
So I went to do this, and I'm like, I'm going to do my, I have this one day per week, Tuesdays, where I have to go to a different university, to their offices, and I have meetings just back to back to back to back. And I usually do data and analysis, so I'm usually at home as much as I can, working from home. This was my most human-y, people-y day, and in an office environment that was very open to the world. So I'm like, okay.
She started dreading it on Sunday for Tuesday.
Right. Yeah. In anticipation. So I filled out my, physiological. I know sleep is a huge risk factor for me. I'm in good health, all of that. And then for my interoception, I don't sense hunger, which is key to this story, but I fill that out on my form. I have my sensory, where I'm super seeker, but super sensitive to smells, sounds, taste and textures, all things like of mine.
Yes.
In most environments, I can find a way to
Move.
use that, and it's a need. So again, this is how it can be kind of a risk or protective. Like, I need to do it. If I can't do it, it's gonna be tough. But when I can do it, it's very effective for my regulation. And then I went through my cognitive, executive functioning, which we'll find out is
lack thereof.
And my communication, Amy alluded to that before. I have words. I can talk about the topics and the tasks all day long. But when you get to my social, I am not socially motivated, and like small talk, chit chat. So I filled this out for myself, and then I started doing it for this university environment and the activities. And to make a very long story a little bit shorter, I basically discovered that in anticipation of these meetings starting, I was throwing in all this sensory, like, let me get a huge burst of morning physical activity before I leave. When I get there, I can go for walks. I can use the stairs. I can do, there's a single stall bathroom.
Scent free.
Yes, it was scent free, no sprays, that I would use for like handstand push-ups and body weight workouts and wall sits, all of this in preparation for these meetings. But what I realized is, the meetings would start at around 11 and go through 3:30, 4, sometimes later, and then I'd be driving home. I was not eating for the entire day until I'd get home at like 6 p.m., 5:30, 6 p.m. And I can't sense hunger, but that doesn't mean it's not influencing my regulation and my ability to engage in those activities. And people would be like, well, don't you see like other people in the office making their lunches? And you're like, oh, I smell them preparing their lunches in the kitchen area, and I have to go to my scent-free bathroom and do more physical activity because I can't deal with the smells.
Which is actually, yes, giving you some buffer, but depleting your energy further and making you less.
So I'm throwing in all this extra activity every time I need more regulation. Haven't eaten. My body is probably running on less than fumes, and I'm trying to be in these meeting situations, which used to especially amp me up until no end, because the agenda for the work tasks would end, and then people would start saying things like, yeah, I need to go to the grocery market because, my sister came this weekend and I used all my food. And I'd be like, do you want money? I don't know what you're saying these things to me. Or we need to talk about our local sports team. And I'd be like, I need to get out of this room. I'm going to flip the table. Which would be, I would get to that point anyway, but the hunger couldn't have been helping it.
It couldn't, right. And once you filled this out, it actually did help a great deal. The other piece, and
because I started using Google Calendar notifications to remind me to eat, rather than I need to go
that executive functioning, and
I need to go do some more physical activity in the single stall bathroom with no sense. Again, it will buffer, but it's going to put me in an even greater caloric deficit in this case. So the story is a perfect example of, someone can have all the strategies in the world, can just be so much more effective.
And that really gets to this next piece that of the same form. So this person in context form is the 3 sections that you just saw. So there's one for the person, there's one for activity, and one for environment. And like we said, practicing now would be great, but then being able to apply it when you get to your unknown, unfamiliar situations will be easier.
We always say too, like, if you spend good time and investment on the first one, getting that person part correct, and doing it for a few different environments and activities, when you have the framework, you might not have to write it out for every environment and every activity after that. You just know, this is my profile. I'm analyzing this environment and activity in this way,
Right.
I can already see there's going to be a great match here or the huge mismatch. So.
Right. And so that's the idea, is this tool is going to give us this opportunity to work through and find these matches and mismatches, and then also figure out, as Jãcqûelyn has said, where the accommodation, supports, and strategies need to come into play. So there are 3 more pages to the tool. So it's a 6-page tool in total. So especially as you're learning it, before you've internalized it, like you just said, you can actually sit down and really go side by side with these columns, and talk about experience, environmental characteristics, activity, possibilities, or supports. And again, keeping in mind, you've already talked through your pieces, but keeping in mind that yes, we want to look for changes to the environment. We want to look for changes to the activity. And we know you've got your sensory friendly initiatives there in Ireland for your universities and things. So some of those things are really on the radar screen for them culturally in Ireland. So those pieces, we actually talk about looking at those things first, and then thinking about how do we expand the strategies or the number of tools that the autistic individuals can use. So that's kind of that last part of the last page, the 6th page, where we talk about what are the strategies, how do partners support, what do we do in the environment, and then what does the individual do for themselves. This idea of being able to kind of create this plan and advocate. And so can you talk just a little bit about what you were like once you worked through this, what you could do with this when you went to work?
Yeah, once I had it all written out, I could take it to my coworkers. They all know I'm autistic, and I could show them my profile so that they could start thinking in this way as well. And they did make some changes for me. Like, they can't obviously control making sure food is going into my body necessarily, but they started making it a rule that I could leave once the work tasks were done on the agenda, and that there was a clear end to that. And there was they actually added an agenda item at the end of every meeting. Now it says like walk-in items and story time, and that's my cue where I can just get out if I need to. So they have been really great about trying to accommodate me.
And being able to share your entire profile and how you experience the environment has been really powerful too, because there was a meeting relatively recently before the lockdown had started that you actually wound up getting a little bit overwhelmed by the situation.
It was going very, very much longer than planned.
And she pushed up into an L-sit, which is basically straight arms, totally out of her chair, in and out. Legs out straight.
They were up over the table.
And what did they say to you?
And someone said, does that mean that you're done or that the meeting needs to be done? And someone else, because this was a really long meeting, someone else was like, both. So, it helps everyone.
But it truly does. And your coworkers, I think, feel so much more empowered to support you in ways that they know are actually going to be helpful to you as well.
So can I just ask there, I'm just really interested about when you're saying that you start to advocate for yourself and telling your peers, do you have any tips? I'm just thinking of maybe students who are just meeting their friends for the first time, starting college, they're just getting to know everybody. Have you any tips for students about how they could bring this up with their friends?
Yeah, I think some of these tools are a great way because you can plan it in your head really well and know that it is the best thing to do and that it will help everyone in the situation. But getting into that situation, then there are no words that come out. So having this written down to hand to someone is very helpful, or to have with you when you discuss it. Because I think one of the hardest parts when you first start telling people you're autistic is they either have really strong ideas of what that means, and it's all based on stereotypic knowledge, shows one person that they knew, and I think one of the best questions though is what does your autism mean to you?
Yes, it's my favorite question to ask.
Yes, so
it really is.
So the more peers that know to ask that, the better. But you can kind of make sure that happens by showing what your profile actually looks like, and just kind of don't have this expectation that you're going to get all the necessary information out in one go. And it's hard. I mean, I still say to Amy, like, I've already had this discussion with this person. I'm not doing it again. And she was like, they don't think like you, like they didn't see it once and it all sunk in and it's in their mind and they're always thinking about that. Like, you're probably going to have to remind them multiple times.
Yeah,
So the repetition, the visual, again, if you have a copy of this that your peers, roommates, professors can keep and can kind of sit on their own and then come back to you and ask questions they have and talk about what it means, I think that can be a really powerful conversation and really helpful.
And we are all for disclosure for sure. I mean, but we also recognize that for some people, information, especially initially, is going to be a daunting task. So maybe even picking like that one place where there might be a mismatch that professor or that roommate really needs to know, maybe something even around smells, and just saying, this smell is really problematic for me. Like, it makes me feel physically sick. And just starting with something that's a bit of a difference about how you experience the environment. And then you can work into some of these other pieces. And Jãcqûelyn, again, she's all about disclosure and things, but it is hard. And we have to be perfectly honest about that. She even struggles. She's lived in the same condo for quite some time. And we recently wrote a letter to her neighbors so that she would tell them that she was autistic, because they were like bombarding her, barraging her as she'd walk out the door. They want to have a conversation with her because she's so smiley. She looks so approachable. But she was literally like peering out her door. And
I was doing scouting reports from every window in my condo. Like, how can I get out
without being seen? And I was like, we are writing a letter. You are going to give this to them. Like, under the cover of night, I don't care. And what wound up happening was she didn't deliver the letter, but because she had it in writing, like we had taken the time to write down what we thought they needed to know, then you could actually initiate the conversation.
Then I told them.
But you gave them the information that you thought they needed. Like, you didn't give them your whole
came
profile.
It came from one of my neighbors seeing me coming back in from walking my dog and saying, "We haven't seen you in so long." And I was like, my scouting reports are so good. But then I was like, yeah, that's because, I'm autistic. And sometimes when I'm getting out of my house, it's because I've had all these Zoom meetings now back to back to back, and I need to walk and move and be away from it. And when I see humans outside, I can't, I need to know that they're not going to come to me in that moment, because I'm too amped up and it's not going to help my energy. It's defeating the purpose.
But I think the critical part of that story was, even though you're all for disclosure, like that was still hard for you. And we boiled it down to the information that we thought they needed to know. They don't need to know everything about you. They don't need to know your entire profile. They need to know what it means for their interactions with you. And so that's the other piece I think that we would really encourage the students to think about is, who are these people? How am I expected to interact with them? And that kind of dictates how much information maybe they need, or what's going to be useful in terms of the interaction.
It's like the non-negotiables.
And then,
did that answer?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that was brilliant, Jãcqûelyn. Thank you. Yeah.
We go on tangents. They're fun for us. But we really, once you've got your profile and you kind of know what your go-to strategies are for you, and then you start putting that in a context and an activity, and you can think in that way, then it's time to figure out the advocacy piece. And so whether it's writing a letter or giving somebody a copy of the pick, if that's something that's useful to them, we also have these other plans on our website, which are more around that energy piece that we talked about when we first started chatting this morning, or whatever time we're airing with you. But, being able to look at the influences of all of these different dimensions that we talked about in the pick, but then how much of our energy do we have to move? If we have to power up a lot, like to go from sleepy and still to amped up and fidgety, like we really got to make a jump up. Or if we need to get from amped up and fidgety down to settled and calm, we have to come down a couple levels. What types of strategies might we want to use to do that? And you can see we've broken down, these are just examples for people to start to think about conceptually, but we do think about strategies in the context of kind of those preventative, make sure your basic needs are taken care of first, right? So if you're going to class for the first day ever at university, if you can get some food in your stomach, that's probably a good idea. If you can't, know that you've got to compensate in some other way, because when you're really amped up, you can't eat. No. And then, think about our sensory motor strategies, the things that you gravitate towards, and what impact do they have on your energy? And like you said, what things increase your energy and what things decrease your energy. And then also we do think about language-based strategies or metacognitive strategies. So this cognitive communication social piece, what increases your energy and what decreases your energy. If you can start now in July and August, September, to kind of fill some of these things in, when you get into a situation, you almost have that toolbox to pull from versus trying to come up with something novel in the moment.
Yeah, this is I've done my pick. I see that there's going to be a mismatch,
right.
But it's going to be in this cognitive domain. And maybe you've experienced it and it's your energy goes up 2 or 3 levels, and you can look in these columns of how to power down 2
right.
levels, but within the domain of cognitive communication rather than in the domain of motor or sensory. So that you're actually targeting what needs to be targeted. Something like asking for a break or using a schedule or a first then board is very different from
right.
I need to go jump on a trampoline. Both can be very effective on your energy, but in different situations, different contexts. So
right.
This is really just trying to make very explicit. It's like a grid, how many levels and in what domain, what do I do?
Yep.
And figuring out, I don't even know if we put this as a slide, but figuring out what you should do for each of these.
The regulator one?
Yeah.
Is that what you want? Okay.
Is that in there?
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to just jump.
Okay.
So the plan that we just had up is downloadable from the website too. And the one that we had up that has those examples in it is to give people ideas to start to think. There's a blank version. What we want is people to take their pick and use the blank version to create their own plan, not to use what we've put there as kind of those generic ideas. Because again, you're unique, you're an individual, your neurology is unique. You've got to make sure that it fits for you and what you need. But this is the one that you asked. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, and this is really targeted towards the sensory motor section. But if you're someone who's okay, maybe I do need movement. Maybe that is something that regulates me.
And it is very much for you.
And maybe it is an area where I'm experiencing a mismatch. How do I know what will make me amp up and what will get me more towards that sleepy and still state? How will I know what it does to my energy?
Right.
And this is a sheet that you can use to test a bunch of different things.
It's very fun.
Which is a fun at-home activity if you're stuck at home.
If you're stuck at home.
And you can go through these things and really think about, all right, how did I feel before? How did I feel after? So what did it do to my energy? Was it alerting or soothing?
Right.
Or neutral? And then importantly, did I like it? Because if it's yuck, you're not going to resort to it, especially if you're amped up or lacking energy altogether. You're not going to do something that feels or is yuck to you.
Right.
So figuring out the things that, if you have a few that are alerting and you like them, and a few that are soothing and you like them, and some that are neutral, because maintaining states is good too.
As we're standing to talk.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. You can get an idea of what you'll be able to do, and you can think about what really brought my energy up. Maybe I need that when I need to jump up 3 levels. So this is really helping to fill in some of those sensory motor. And then I think for the more cognitive communication, social, you can do a similar setup,
right?
But you would be testing things more like using timers, schedules, and you might inherently know some of those things that work for you.
If they're headed to university, they probably have some ideas of things that they use to navigate or that people use to support them,
right?
Too. Right. Yeah. All right.
Do you have more that we want to talk about right now?
I don't think so. I think we need to make sure we take their questions.
Let's do the questions.
Is that okay, Katie?
Yeah, brilliant.
I'll stop sharing. There's tons of stuff on the website to download these tools. And again, I think if people use them now and start to play around with them, they could be really useful when they get to school, whatever that looks like. My cursor, here it is.
Yeah, I think if students can, as you say, start practicing that over the summer, then by the time college starts, they're really going to have that good sense of understanding about what they need. It's just so many brilliant resources there. I think it's just brilliant. And I think actually you've answered a lot of the questions, but I'll just have a little look here. So in terms of maybe if staff is supporting students and they're looking at how they can support that move to online, again, would you recommend that they would work through this with a student to see, you know, there's a very big difference between being at home in your own room, studying in your own office, to being in college. So have you any advice maybe, JÄcqûelyn, for that, about how students can use the PIC for that change of environment?
Yeah, I think, like we said earlier, that self-understanding will already give you kind of a head start in, because regardless of filling that out or not, you're going to know that some kind of change like that is going to be probably dysregulating. But if you understand yourself, you can analyze it in a more kind of effective way that could help you. And we have a resource actually about living and learning online during a pandemic, and it's focused more on younger kids in that case.
Yes,
but there are some things that really apply no matter the age, and some of those graphs that Amy showed in the beginning that have what does your day look like, and making sure that you're getting in what you need first. It's a pyramid, and that base has to be fulfilled first, because if you're not meeting your regulation needs, there's no way that you're going to engage in that online platform. So I think
so vital. Yeah.
One of the other pieces, and again, it's currently written for younger learners because we were supporting a school at the time, but we have one that really talks about Zoom and engaging in Zoom type calls for autistic individuals. You guys are all really privileged right now because she usually would not have her camera on if she was by herself. And she might not even be anywhere near the screen because she wouldn't want to be looking at other people's faces either. So Katie, you're super lucky at the moment.
Not because they're horrific and haunting, but because they're visually so distracting, and I'm not going to comprehend the question that you're asking if I start looking at everything that's going on. I appreciate her blank background, actually.
But we have but one of the other things that I would say in that resource, and again, maybe we could probably rework it for older students as well, but we talk a lot about visual backgrounds and what's happening in the background and accommodations that staff can make. So even having, can you request the slide deck ahead of time so you can review it, so that you're not trying to process the visual of the slide deck with somebody talking with at the same time. Like we've talked a lot about those things. We've also talked about, can a teacher just share their screen and not have the video playing at the same time? And just being able to make those accommodations make learning so different for people on Zoom. Like we can create an entirely dysregulating experience on Zoom for you, or we can create something that you can actually function with.
And the more predictable the structure of the classes, the better. So maybe the class isn't perfect for what you need, but if it's exactly the same every time and you know what's coming, that's also really helpful. And I just want to say to students, this is all really hard. And we often say, for everyone involved in this, just learning all of this about yourself and making it through the situation and taking the knowledge you can from it is one of the greatest lessons you can learn. Forget course content for now. Doing this is real life. This is experiential learning. Crash course.
It's a degree we weren't expecting.
Right. So, it's going to be hard. There's going to be days where you make it work and you get through it, and it's like rock on, I'm a rock star. And there are going to be days where it still doesn't come together. So give yourself some, and staff, give
Some
students
grace, yeah.
some break, and students give staff some break because they're going to be accommodating a lot too.
Yeah.
We all really just have to, this is like a time where we really have to have some serious.
I think that's the last line of a lot of our online supports. It says like, no 2 days are probably going to look the same, and because it worked one day doesn't mean it's going to work the next, and that's okay. I think that's what it says. That's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, very good. Yeah, and I think like you've touched there on that next question about developing that healthy, balanced routine while also managing the academic studies. So I think your point of saying you have to know what you need first before you can manage everything else, then you'll be able to manage the academic side. You know, that understanding is there.
Yeah, and we kind of encourage, if you can take those activities that you love and they don't drain you, they give you energy, and kind of put them into a nice schedule and routine for that, then you can, you know, start layering on one academic activity, like that one class I have to attend to, or that one paper I'm supposed to be working on. I'll do that for whatever time. But first and foremost is your own needs, because.
But we do believe in creating a structure and a predictability around those things too, because that's, again, we know that routine and structure are organizing for all of us. And if we can take those organizing activities and put them in this organizing structure, like we're going to give ourselves a foundation that can help our success in other areas.
Brilliant. And then looking at the questions from students, we had a question in about any tips for managing energy when they're on a clinical placement, which is part of their college course. And in the past, the student has found that it's very taxing and draining compared to the academic side of their course. So I don't know, do you have, maybe they could fill out one specifically for their placement and see is there parts of the placement they find difficult, or what tips would you have for that student?
I think that's actually a really brilliant idea, is trying to figure out what part of it is draining. Because if for JÄcqûelyn, especially when she was talking about this university day where she'd go to meeting, like the actual work tasks were, while they would be difficult for most of us, were ridiculously easy for her, right? And she was finishing them in half the time. It was truly all the social face time and interaction, which was draining. So it was figuring out what part and how to attack that piece of it, or bringing those strategies. So part of it is, yes, making sure she's eating. Part of it's, yes, making sure she's got her regulating sensory motor. Part of it is talking to the staff about, there are times that we need to be face-to-face and I'll be present with you and I can definitely talk about this content area, but please don't talk to me about grocery shopping. And I'm not being rude. It's too much for me.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a clinical placement or any kind of like that experiential, real life, hands-on learning, it's for you. So use that experience to kind of keep track of, these are the things I'm going to have to advocate for or make sure I have available to me when I go out to a job. It's again one of those situations where it's new to you. It's less predictable than the coursework. So just using that information of when is it a match for me, and what are the things I'm doing, and what are the things in the environment that are supporting that, and when it's not, and really using that for your career development as a clinical placement is supposed to do.
All these self-care people.
And then just I'm looking in terms of socializing with friends and how people could know, you know, say what they need. But then this question is about that this person has sensory processing disorder and any changes to routine is difficult. But then on top of that, if they have to go out and socialize, then, you know, how can they manage that day better when they feel they want to socialize but just need to manage that energy better?
I think that's the key starting place, is what does socializing do to your energy? And is it something that's truly desired, or is it something that you feel like you have to do. I think that's an important distinction. It sounds like this person truly probably does want to go out. But I think being able to have that honest conversation with yourself, because I mean, there are situations that you have found yourself in where you feel like you should socialize and you, and she doesn't want to. And if that's the case, giving yourself permission not to, if it's the right decision for you, in that moment is an important thing.
Yeah. Or giving, just understanding what is preferred socializing for you.
Right.
Because maybe you cannot go out to some large group activity that night, but maybe if you have like that one really good friend who will come and just like, parallel play some games with you, like, or you're both on your phones together, that can be a really nice experience for people who have that kind of social motivation, where you're getting that social and you're with someone you care about and have fun with, but you're not in these situations where it's loud and it's going to impact on all those sensory things that are probably already way up here if you're at that point. So I think just understanding that it can look very different too.
Yeah, for different people. And then I think, there are those situations that maybe they do want to go out to the large party or something. Planning your day around knowing that that activity is coming for you is really important too, right? So like we said, think about your day and think about your energy throughout your day and which activities require what. If you need that big reserve at the end, trying to figure out how you save it across the day, because you can save it across the day, or how you replenish in some way before you get yourself into that situation is going to be really critical. Because we know if you're going into a challenging situation in a deficit, it's probably not going to wind up well. So I know that was a really long-winded answer from a lot of different angles, but I think it's important to think about it. Like, is this something that's desired? Is it something that I feel like I need to give myself permission not to? Is it something that I want to do, but I want to change the qualities of it? Or no, I really want to do it in this way. I've got to get myself ready for it.
Yeah.
Well, we do that for you at times when you have a big event coming up. I'll just text her and be like, "What's your plan?" And she'll be like, because even though she's so self-aware, like even like putting herself in that place, because it's almost like she's already anticipating whatever that big event is, and she can't call on the resources to create the plan until I tell her, okay, we're going to come up with this now. Like, I might kickstart you, but what's your plan?
Yeah, brilliant. And I think you touched on it as well, but we had the question about a student moving away from home for the first time, going into shared accommodation. And I just really love what you're saying about, talking to others that you're living with, and how you navigate that. I think, a lot of students, as you say, whether they're first years, second years, or third years, are going to find that difficult living with others. But do you have any other final tips for any students doing that?
That's a tough one for me. I would definitely use the pick. or have it in some way that is written where I can hand it to them, because I know myself, and I know that it's not the conversation itself, but it's like, how do I even get to that conversation? Like, it doesn't, like autism doesn't just like
roll off the tongue.
No, it doesn't like pop up in conversations because people are too busy talking about the weather. So like it can be, the hardest part for me is like starting the like initiating it. And so I know that, and I know having it written down can help me, and leaving it as like a letter or emailing. Right. If you have the emailing that to them ahead of time, and you can ask them about them as well, which gives you knowledge before you go into the situation,
which is important
to know about them.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that might be interesting to share is just kind of what your daily routine is, because some people's are really different, and you go to bed really early, but you also get up really early. And so you can't shift that for a roommate, because it's just how you're wired.
Right.
Her circadian rhythms are just, they are what they are. You've never been able to successfully shift your sleep and awake time. So, but for a roommate to have that knowledge going in, but then for you to be able to kind of be true to that and say, I'm going to be as respectful as possible and as quiet as possible when I get up, but I am going to get up.
Yeah.
And these are hard when we're talking about students who are, 17, 18, 19 years old and be like, this is who I am. But we know the more you can be who you are in a situation, the more protective that is in terms of your regulation and your mental health. So just trying to figure out which components of that are it would be super important for your roommate to know that about you.
Yeah.
Because you can't change it. And if you tried, it would have a massive impact on you.
Right.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. That was brilliant. Answered all of the questions. I think this is just a brilliant resource, and well done to both of you. And I'm really excited now that Irish students are going to get a chance to give it a go, and as you say, have a really positive effect on their mental health. So thank you.
That's our goal. Thank you.